My name is Felix Njofi. This is another step of my story, standing up against UK royal racist family that is standing on my way of justice. Thank you for watching.
It is Britain's most famous unsolved murder and continues to be a blot on the social conscience of the country. The killing of black teenager Stephen Lawrence 13 years ago became the unwelcome symbol of the 90s. We watched as Stephen's parents, driven by grief and a vain search for justice, took on an establishment that didn't want to listen. We watched as 5 white racists suspected of the killing treated the legal system with contempt. The police failed the Lawrences, and their struggle for justice was played out before us in a series of high-profile events. A trial, an inquest, an inquiry. The case was to change British attitudes to race relations and for the first time force the police as an institution to confront its racism. But still, no one has been convicted of committing this racist murder. The authorities say there's not enough evidence to prosecute these men. So we launched our own investigation. We wanted to see if their alibis stand up. We found that they don't.
I'm here today to tell you, Mark, that them boys killed Stephen Lawrence. There's no question about it.
And for the first time, we'll show how the original police investigation was hampered by a corrupt senior detective and how this vital information did not reach the Lawrence inquiry.
I would say that John Davison was receiving cash from Clifford Norris. By his expression that he was using, it was getting a little earner out of it. It was a good little earner.
This is the story of how the Lawrence Five are getting away with murder. The 5 men so famously accused of the murder are Neil Acorte, his brother Jamie Acorte, Gary Dobson, Luke Knight, and David Norris. Today, they live their lives as free men, unpunished. All the suspects are still living locally and close to where Stephen died. Some of them have their own sons now. They appear settled, happy and content. The suspects believe they have put the Stephen Lawrence case behind them because they know the police investigation is dormant. Their neighbours may not even know who these men are, who they really are, and what they've done. I've spent the last 12 months trying to find out. I can now piece together the events of the night of Stephen's murder, having gained unprecedented access to documents and intelligence as well as to senior detectives. And I've tracked down dozens of witnesses, still living in fear of the consequences of speaking out. Many have helped me, but some remain too scared, even now, 13 years on. Stephen Lawrence died here, on this spot, on the 22nd of April 1993. This is Well Hall Road in Eltham, an area of South London which had already seen 3 racist murders in as many years. At that time, visitors to the area were welcomed by the graffiti slogan, "Watch out, coons, you're now entering Eltham." My starting point for this investigation is to be the man who was with Stephen when he was attacked. He is both a witness and a victim. This is what he told me.
Steve and I left his uncle's house around 10 o'clock. He wanted to get home as quick as possible. His mother was coming back from a course and he wanted to see her. When we first got off the bus and we was crossing over the roundabout, I looked back down Well Hall Road to see a group of white boys walking up the road.
Let's go and see if there's a bus coming. The bus is coming.
I had shouted to him, "Can you see a bus?"
Can you see it?
And directly opposite to him across the road were the suspects I saw the first person who shouted, what nigger, who then started to run across the road. I knew there was danger. White youths on the other side of the road, using racist language, and wearing Elton, that's danger.
Were you scared?
I was terrified.
What the guy?
I saw the first person who shouted, what nigger. He hit Steve with a striking blow from up above, straight down. Now, from the angle I saw, to me, it looked like he had hit him in the head. At the time of the blow, he did scream. I've never heard anybody scream like that before.
Fucking hell, are you? What? Prick, mate, prick!
Oh, God, no, please! Steve, get up! Come on, Steve, let's go! Keep running! Right, wait, keep running!
While we was running up Well Hall Road, I noticed that his jacket was puffed out and he had blood all around his neck. He kept saying to me, Dwayne, tell me what's wrong, tell me what's wrong. The more he was running, the fainter his voice was.
By the next day, the Eltham rumour mill was in full swing. Everybody was talking about this murder and who they thought had done it. And this information was piling into the police incident room through phone calls and notes, virtually all of them naming the same group of suspects.
Within 48 hours of the murder, the police had received no fewer than 26 separate tip-offs pointing them to the same group of people. It's a remarkable thing in a police investigation, very unusual.
They had information coming in to the incident room fairly early on, the names of individuals who were suspected of the murder. You only need reasonable grounds to suspect somebody of an offence in order for them to be arrested. More critically is if you don't get arrested early on, then you lose the potential of getting the most significant evidence in any murder case, which is forensic evidence. There's a rule. There's a golden period. The first 24 hours of any murder scene is when you're going to get, critically, the most significant piece of evidence.
The golden period was squandered. Despite the flurry of early tip-offs, no arrests were made. Instead, the police allowed potentially priceless evidence to slip through their fingers. This picture, never broadcast before, was taken by police surveillance photographers just 5 days after the murder. It shows Jamie Acorn leaving his house with a full black bin liner. He then got into a car and drove off. Suspicious? I think so. Did the police agree? Will they let him go without stopping or even following him?
One can only speculate what kind of material was in those black bin liners. If they'd been stopped, if the items in the black bin liners could have been seized, examined, one dreads to think the potential for incriminating evidence being found in there.
Incompetent. That was the verdict of the inquiry carried out by the Police Complaints Authority. I spoke to one of the men who led that investigation.
The basic problem was one of leadership. It had no direction and it had no real idea of what it was trying to achieve. And therefore it missed opportunities. There were things that should have been done quickly, would normally have been done quickly, that were missed. This case would be about forensic evidence, and it was about identification evidence. And that evidence needed to be captured as soon as possible and tested. And those were two golden opportunities that were missed in the first investigation that were so very difficult to recover from.
The police weren't just watching Jamie, they had all of them in their sights. These surveillance pictures, shown for the first time, were taken just days after the murder. They had the suspects within their grasp, but failed to act.
It's 2 weeks since Stephen's death. If a black person had committed a murder, they would have arrested him by now. But because it's a black and it's white, it seems as if they're condoning what these people are doing, because they're not showing to us that they are out there doing their job and arresting people.
Despite strong grounds for arrest, emerging within 48 hours of the murder, it took 13 days and an appeal from the world's #1 humanitarian before arrest warrants were obtained. The next day, the Acorts and Dobson were arrested at dawn. David Norris, suspiciously, was not at home. These police interviews have never been heard before, and for 16 and 17-year-olds with nothing to hide, they seem ever so reluctant to answer any questions. But make up your own mind.
Can you stop the machine?
Investigations had already begun to reveal that discrimination on the basis of colour was rife.
When I worked for Panorama, we undertook one investigation into the colour bar on the railways, because it was absolutely clear that the railways were not employing black people.
It's much harder for a West Indian to get a job in Britain today than it was a year ago. But how much of the trouble is due to colour prejudice?
Is there any colour bar on British railways?
No, there is no colour bar on British railways.
I went down to the station master at a big London station. This is Mr. Davis, the goods agent in charge of Smithfield Depot. How many vacancies have you at the moment?
It's 9 vacancies for staff at the moment.
Next day at Lambeth, I met 4 unemployed Jamaican. They had been looking for work for weeks. They weren't skilled, but they could read and write, and as far as I could judge, they were intelligent and had good records. So I suggested that they should go to Smithfield to ask for the jobs which the manager had said were vacant. They went there on Thursday morning. They were turned down. I went straight back to Mr. Davis for another interview.
Now, Mr. Davis, you have vacancies here.
Oh, yes.
But now, 4 coloured men came this morning to ask for jobs and they were turned away. Why was that?
I see.
It was denied that there was any discrimination, but the plain fact was that the unions didn't want it and management went along with it. Now, why is it that there is a prejudice here against coloured men?
Oh, there's no prejudice, Mr. Chataway.
But no official information existed about the extent of racial discrimination in Britain.
The government set up a small unit to go round the country to all the local authority areas which had large numbers of immigrants. We also made a point of visiting major employers. They were quite happy to employ coloured people, providing they weren't visible. In other words, if they worked in the kitchens, that was all right. But employers felt that shoppers wouldn't like to see coloured hands handling food over the counter. They thought that ladies wouldn't be happy to buy their underwear from coloured girls.
To get black people in shops, we actually had to get the cooperation of one of the key persons in the Oxford and Regent Street Traders Association. And this person said to me, if you can find me, and I want you to listen carefully, 4 pretty black girls, pretty in quotation marks, I will employ them. And then my colleagues will follow.
One minister who had personal experience of the extent of racial prejudice was Barbara Castle. As Overseas Development Minister, she entertained Commonwealth politicians, including Malawi's Hastings Banda.
He was my least favourite Commonwealth Prime Minister. He was running a dictatorship in Malawi. He was sidling up to South Africa. He was disliked and loathed by other Africans, and he certainly was by me. But he seized his opportunity to draw me up to him and put his cheek against mine and show us apparently canoodling. Well, I was very angry because he'd no right to do that. But, of course, the Express seized the opportunity, and there was this enormous picture the next day on the Express showing this embrace. And I received the filthiest and most racist letters I'd ever received following that. I mean, with the people had cut out the Express photo. One wrote across it, disgusting. Another said, nigger lover. And one letter said, if these kind of things can take place in public, heaven knows what goes on behind the scenes.
Roy Jenkins, the new Home Secretary, came to the job determined to legislate against discrimination.
I had a sort of agenda, a liberal agenda, if you like, which I had set out in a little Penguin special, which I had written for the 1959.
Let's return to Brexit. We were in Brussels in the European Parliament after 5 o'clock. It's triggered political turmoil and angst throughout the EU and on the ground in Britain. A documented and widely reported rise in racist attacks. The Muslim Council of Britain put together a gallery of 100 hate incidents from social media accounts and called for the Home Secretary to step up security for migrants in the country. Meanwhile, anti-immigration leaflets citing Polish vermin have been posted on cars, and people going about their daily lives have been told to go home, wherever home is. But what if Britain is the only home you know? I spoke to Rishi Patel, who was attacked in the street in London on the afternoon of the referendum result, and asked him what happened.
Was walking with a friend down the Strand, which is kind of one of the main kind of busy streets in central London. Didn't really kind of think about anything. We were just chatting about what had happened and kind of what it meant and how we felt about it. And out of nowhere, a guy came up to me and he swore at me, and then he punched me in the face. I mean, I was really lucky. I think I was wearing these very big glasses, which now are in fashion, in vogue, as they say, and they basically took a lot of the blow. So I spared myself kind of a black eye or any kind of huge physical damage. But it was all very, very sudden. I didn't really know what was going on, and then he ran away, and lots of people came to my aid from the street, and yeah, it all happened in a blur. I don't even really know what he said, because after that kind of thing happens, you kind of black out, and you don't really know what's happened. It was all very, very sudden.
Rishi, you are clearly English, quintessentially English, beautifully English, but you are ethnically, forgive, this is a terrible question and I feel ashamed to ask it, but I suspect it's material. What ethnicity are you?
Yeah, so I think it's important to say. So, I'm an Indian person, Indian origin person, I should say. My parents are Indian. They came to the UK in the 70s. And so ethnically I'm Indian, but it's strange, because obviously we're on the radio, so you can't see what I look like, but yeah, I don't think I sound particularly Indian. In fact, I probably sound more English than most English people.
You do, and
by
so
circumstance of where I was born and where I grew up, but I think so. Yeah, it's quite peculiar. I think physically, I definitely stand out as someone who doesn't look white, but I never thought that that would ever be a thing in a multi-ethnic and multiracial society like in London.